I'll be asking a question when this course was being made. So you made mention of the institution that is being organized in Africa to try and develop leaders. So if we are going to have the challenge now you are saying is bad leadership. Now, and there's an institution that wants to produce leaders. Are we trying to say that it's going to be strictly on leaders that have gone through a necessitated process that will govern society? Doesn't that deny the potential for other people who may just be a David somewhere to come and lead God's people?
Okay, thank you very much. And we are speaking from a perspective of the fact that leadership is not just an acquisition of some certain skill sets, but is somebody who has an answer to a problem. And that understanding rhymes with what Ronald Hertzfeld, a professor of leadership from Harvard Kennedy School, spoke about. He's a propounder of adaptive leadership principle. And adaptive leadership principle speaks about an understanding that if there's a problem, you should lead people towards solving the problem. And that's where leadership comes. If you view leadership as when there's a problem, somebody is coming up to be and answer the problem, it helps. So that's the understanding that comes from. So somebody is building some person with a skill set, with a belief that he has an idea of what the problem is. And if he doesn't have this skill set or have an understanding of this and this, he may eventually be an answer to the problem. So what we are having now is not necessarily a stereotyping of the people to have leaders they will choose, but it's an intention to create people who have existed in the time past. Let me give you an idea of what he has. He has segregated the leaders into generations. He gave the first generation, second generation, the third generation. In the first generation, he mentioned two leaders that were very, maybe very outspoken, and okay, so we can call someone like Kwame Nkrumah. He mentioned Kwame Nkrumah. He mentioned Julius Nyerere. When it comes to the second generation, he mentioned people like, on our own part, he mentioned people like Sani Abacha. So he was mentioning those people that they took us backward. Then later on, we have people appear on the scene. He now mentioned Nelson Mandela. He now mentioned somebody like Paul Kagame of Rwanda. So the expectation is there's a fourth generation of leaders, we coming up, who should have a certain level of problem-solving skills, because leadership is about problem-solving. So we have a problem on ground. We cannot say we not look at leadership. Anytime there have been a success in any system around the world, names pop up, and those names are leadership names. Be it Williams, be it, let's say, what's his name again? I'm talking about the activist that stopped and was finding about black marginalization in America, Martin Luther. Be it Nelson Mandela, or you're talking about this guy from India, Mahatma Gandhi of India. People, names pop up. You want to talk about Dubai, you call their prince, names pop up. Anytime there's a major breakthrough in system or anything, there's somebody who is visionary. There's somebody who is looking at development. There's somebody who has placed personal interest aside. There's somebody who is not looking at the money to pack, as you were saying. Because as Professor Lumumba said, he said people are coming up who see politics as a midstream scheme, the leadership. They want to grab power so that they will pack money for themselves and their family. And this is the problem we have. We have a genuine problem on ground. We are raising people. The answer to our problem will be leadership. That's the truth about it. And as long as we continue having the wrong people going there, we will continue to have what we have. We have somebody who's visionary enough, who has the right skill set, who has the mind and the intention and the knowledge to solve our problem. By God's grace, we have Dr. Anza, who is here, spoken elaborately. The truth is that if he does not get into power, he will not do it. The truth is that if he's corrupt, he cannot give us the change he's talking about, because we have had people who spoke about development and change on social media to here to nowhere. They gave them social assistant to governor or any of these small positions. Their language changed. It's a matter of moral values. It was a challenge of your integrity, and it's a problem. That's why you can contrast people from different nations. That's why you can carry Nigeria and say, this is a Nigerian. No. You carry an Indian person, this is a Nigerian and Indian. The reason why we identify people from nations and we label them by some certain level of integrity is because they themselves have a representation of what they hold as values. This is what we're talking about. So essentially, we're reducing it to a place where we don't have value systems that help us. And this value system, no matter the system we put on ground, may not work. So I'm talking about leadership growth because he was a product of a broken society. He had to move from one nation to the other nation because he was in Zimbabwe. He moved because of the war. He moved to a nation, the war happened, he moved to another nation. When he came back to his country, the president who was running side by side with Nelson Mandela for apartheid struggle, his name is Mugabe. Mugabe was trying initially, then suddenly Mugabe wanted to hold power for 37 years, and they had to force him out of office. His counterpart, Mandela, held office one tenure and gave it. So there was a whole lot of difference because his country took a retrograde step, things went bad. I'm not really saying that people, if they stay in office for long, things will go bad. We have Paul Kagame, he has been there, I think, since 2002. He has been there for over 20 years. There's progress in his nation. What are we talking about? We're talking about conscience, integrity, moral values. And at any point, even if you're a good leader, you are doing well, by the time you push that aside, you start taking a backward movement. I mean, this is what we're talking about, right? So we're talking about primarily. I want to be underline that word, primarily. If we're discussing here because we want to have a solution, the question of integrity is what I hold to heart as I sit here. For you, for him, and for Dr. Anza, it's a question of integrity. If there's any solution we can proffer Nigeria, it will boil down to the fact that we are more interested about helping than taking. I come from a place, if I wanted to take, it will be more easier for me to take than to want to help. So sometimes you are in a society, you are placed in a way that it is more natural for you to go that way. But then you say no, because of your moral integrity, how you have been raised up, you can take a different side and help. So I think, by and large, we are not in the denial of a problem of a system. Do you understand? But we are allergic to the fact that we need people who will give us leadership. Sorry, before I will give you time to talk, let me give an analogy of a personal experience. Benin State University Medical Student Association, that's Bentusa. We came in, no, before we came in, we had a congress. This is just a very short narrative. We had a congress, we were discussing dues collection. They said dues collection should be automated. I'm trying to talk about system and integrity. It should be automated to the account because when they give people money on the hand, by the time they say strike, before they complete 1 month, 2 months, money has finished, they come back and they pad up and give us, and my miscellaneous will be 1 point something million. We said, no, we cannot have this kind of, let this be automated so that we can have money in the right place. Somebody stood up and said that he likes collecting dues by the hand. He likes, when he pays dues by the hand, he's happy. He said that thing with the intention that his friend was going to become a president. And if they just be collected by hand, he had an opportunity to get from it. So people took that home and they work with it because the same person would come for speaker and will lose for similar segments. So it was the integrity of people who were in the house who felt they needed an automation that insisted an automation should be put in place. And when it was put in place, it was still the integrity of the financial secretary, the integrity of the speaker, and the integrity of people in the government not to sign money out because they still had the right to sign money out and eat it and explain away. Yeah. So we still have people in government saying, no, let's not remove this money. Let's not remove this money for this reason. Until today, they know it's standing. And I can't say that association has been suspended for more than a year now. We still have monies that were there intact. We have a financial secretary who is accountable. We have a president who is not insisting that they must remove money. We have a speaker who is saying, no, let the money be kept so that anytime the association come on board, we can hand over these things to the next association to run with it. So this is the kind of argument we are making.
Sorry. Thank you. Before now, I'll definitely pass the mic to Dr. Anza. But before I do that, let me just respond to something. Maybe he can pick up from there or go however he wants. He made mention of good names like Nelson Mandela, Paul Kagame, which is also Paul. I think Paul Kagame helps me answer your question about change. If it's working, referring back to tech, there's this slogan we use, like, if you write a code and it dey work, no touch am. If it's working, don't touch it, just let it be. Okay, on Nelson Mandela, I just want us to remember Nelson Mandela's fight, because he brought Nelson Mandela up. Nelson Mandela was not really fighting a man. He was not really fighting the leaders. No. He was fighting the apartheid system. That was his fight. And it helps bring out the point of our debate, which is what the political system.
Thank you very much, Gideon, for making my ride easy for me. Thank you for very strong arguments from your end. Leveraging on the example of Nelson Mandela, Kachina talked about, he posed the question to us, how can the good leaders, how can the system change if good leaders don't get in to change the system? But our question to him is, how can good leaders get in to change the system if the system doesn't even allow them get in the first instance? Look at the example of Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela fought against apartheid, which was a system, an impregnable system of oppression that wouldn't allow black people to as little as vote their own leaders. South Africa had been existing for a very long time. You couldn't even vote as a black man. There were places you couldn't go. If I was a black man living in South Africa, maybe I was living in Gado Villa, and I needed to go to visit somebody in New GRA, I would have to obtain permission from the government. The government agency will give me permission to go to Gado Villa, and I will carry my pass. It will state my name, where I come from, and my purpose of visit to New GRA, and the duration within which I'm supposed to stay. So I can even be moving about there, and my stay will expire, and I'll have to run back, because if I'm arrested there, I'll become an illegal, and that was the kind of system that was being run. So this man, he was in prison for 27 years, fighting for change. And it was not, while he was in prison for 27 years, there were a series of leaders that came and went. So it was not the leader per se that was Mandela's problem, it was the system. And as great as he was, as passionate and patriotic as he was, he wouldn't have gotten in. If he hadn't gotten in, we wouldn't be talking about all of those things today. We wouldn't be talking about all of them today. Then let's talk about people like, and Mandela himself, on his own admission, said, some of the time he got justice in court, even though he didn't expect to get it. Sometimes he got justice in court. Bring that to Nigeria. Bring that to Nigeria. What is the chance that you would surprisingly just get a surprise right judgment? I leave it to you, but you are aware that there's an ongoing social media issue now about an activist lawyer who's been arrested because he wrote a book about Nigeria and its criminal justice system. Unfortunately for the justice system, it is acting out the script in the book unperturbed, undisturbed, unhindered. So how can the people get in? How can the good people even get in the first instance if the system doesn't allow them, to get in? And then you replied to the point that Pastor Sule made earlier about Nigerians being greed. There's no greed is not genetic. It's not racial. There's greed everywhere. There's greed in America. There's greed in Europe. There's greed in Asia. There are no scientific studies that can say categorically on the basis of scientific authority that the amount of greed or the variant of greed found among Nigerians is more potent or more toxic compared to greed, the variant found in other races. But what happens in those systems is that there are systems that check that people over time become aware that even though they may not have internal restraint and morality imposes on them, the external restraint forces them to conform to lawful behavior. Chinua Achebe, in his book The Trouble with Nigeria, said that given an atmosphere of given adequate social education, the average individual, every citizen, will come to realize that it is in their own interest to uphold the rule of law. And if a sufficient number of persons have that understanding, the resulting climate will be called a climate of order. But without that, it's not going to happen. People have committed crimes. We have tried people in this country severally for crimes that they kept escaping judgment, and they found their way mistakenly or whatever into a foreign country, and they were tried and sentenced to jail. I can give you cases of big men who would never have faced justice if not for foreign courts. Not because those people are better people, but because they have systems that you can't outsmart everybody. You can't outsmart every barrier in the system. You know, so the systems are important because they will make way for the right men to come in and then enforce continuity. Thank you.
All right. So before you pass the mic, I just have a question. Sir Kachina asked a question on who does the reforms. If we are pushing forward for a structural revolution in Nigeria's system, now who does the reform? Because the leaders currently in power are termed as bad leaders, and whatever reforms they are proposing will still be in support of their own personal agendas. So, what are the measures that a reform system guarantees to bringing these check and balances that we are looking for? And also, you also made mention about the individualization for regions to handle their resources. Doesn't that put a certain level of bias resource availability for other regions that perhaps do not have oil to it now boils on the question of how much is available for where you stay. So you get to see more pressure on economies that are doing well even within the state or the country that we have currently.
Thank you very much. The first question is how the people can get in when the who will do the reforms when the corrupt system is not when the people in power, the leaders, are already bad people. How will they bring about the kind of reforms that will reform the systems that we are talking about? I think the mistake we make is that we think we are trying to make an argument that sounds like the reforms have to come from the people who are in power. They don't have to come from people who are in power. They don't have to come from people who are in power. People are in power. The power, it was Kwame Nkrumah, whom we quoted a little earlier, who says, true power, the power that can stand the test of time, belongs to the people. He said, there's no force, no matter how impregnable, that can withstand the test, the power of the people, because true power belongs to the people. And during the NSAS protest, there was one of the quotes that caught my eye. He said, the power, in the people is greater than the people in power. The power in the people is greater than the people in power. Now, let me tell you that you don't need to have the people in power to initiate reforms. They will initiate reforms. And if they initiate reforms, those reforms will only be to further entrench their own wicked, ideologies and ensure the succession of their own generation of wicked people. But there is a third player that we are not factoring into this equation. That is the people. The people, the common people. And why we are not factoring them in is because of the system. We have a system today that honors ill-gotten wealth. We have a system today that honors corruption. We have a system today that celebrates lawlessness. If I come in here and I have a political disagreement with my neighbor who maybe happens to belong to the opposite political camp, and I can lock down Urukum on Monday morning, my supporters will be clapping for me all over social media that this is man way strong. He locked down the whole of Urukum. But that is lawlessness. That is lawlessness, but it's being celebrated. So it is because of the system that these people are in power, because the system enables them to continue to be in power. And the system that enables them derives from the value system of the people. You and me, all of us put together, constitute that system. So if any day the people get angry and get tired and get to the street, look at what happened. Okay, let me not talk about Syria because we know that there's a lot of armed fighting that happened. But look at the Arab Spring that started in Tunisia, right? Where the president, Ben Ali, had to flee the country. There was no shooting involved. Citizens just got angry and got out of their homes and said, "You are either going or we go." And it was easier for him to leave, and he left. It spread over into Egypt. Where Mubarak had been there for how long, and he had to leave because the power in the people is greater than the people in power. So the reform doesn't have to come from people in power. It will never happen. The people outside have to force the people in power out, and then they make the way open for the kind of leaders that you are advocating to come. Otherwise, they will never get in. In fact, they will get into jails far easier and in larger numbers than they will ever get anywhere close to the corridors of power. Then you asked the question of the second question about resource control, whether it will be just or fair, to have people who have take for themselves and then those who don't have go home hungry. I think it's a principle of it's borders of productivity. And first of all, I don't agree that there's any part of the country that doesn't have. Yes, there's no part of the country that doesn't have. Before the discovery of oil in Nigeria at commercial quantities in 1958, look at what was happening in the north, what we're calling the Granite Pyramid. Agriculture was sustaining this country. And at that time, the Nigerian naira was exchanging, for those of you who may not have come across that piece of history, it was $1 was exchanging at less than 1 naira. That means if you have 1 naira, you have more than $1. And people were flying from here to the UK. But the pound sterling was about the value of the naira. So if I have 2,500 naira in my pocket, I'm good to go. So I can just close here and say, because of the debate here, let me go to UK and rest over the night. And I can get the night flight and fly over to UK. I come back by morning in time to attend to my work. That was happening in this country because people were producing. If we produce today, all this issue of the naira here and there is because we are not producing. If you come to the international, when you come to trade, your currency will rise according to how much it is in demand and how much, when people come to buy from Nigeria, they have to pay in my currency. So I'm going to peg, say, for me, the level at which I will give you my naira for you to enter my domestic market and shop is at this. So if you don't need what I'm producing, you say get out and you go away. Meanwhile, I need what you're producing, so I will come down and you say no. If you don't bring 5,000 naira, I will not give you $1. And because I need to come into your market and I need to come into the dollar, I will say, please, can I pay 4,900? What's the last price? So my currency continues to slump. But if you are producing, now if your state is not able to produce, the problem is with the person who is there. Let him make way for somebody who has got ideas to come in and produce. Because you can't tell me you have air, you have sunlight, you have water, you have land, you have people who are thinking, and you say you can't produce. Look at, I think, is it Dubai? Look at UAE. Look at countries that don't have oil. Look at Israel. Look at Israel. What is the irrigation? How much is the rainfall in Israel? But if you look at the tomato from Galilee, one tomato can make you a pot of stew. Why? Because people are thinking, and they know that they have nowhere else to go unless they produce what they consume. So we need to set this mentality. It's problematic because people are rigging population figures. Why are they rigging population figures? Because if I come and say we have 50 billion in my house, 50 million in my house, you will give me more money. So why don't we overturn, instead of a consumption-based sharing formula, why don't we change it to a production-based sharing formula? You say you have 50 million, okay, good. Produce something that is the equivalent of the product of 50 million and give federal government 10%. You see people will shrink their populations back to their normal size, and some of them will shrink smaller sizes. Thank you.